Welcome. This is TechWorks Technical Training, Part 1 for the Integrated Messaging and Reporting System, better known as our IMR. I'm Mark Dundas, and I'll be your host. Before we get started, a little housekeeping. The audience for this training is the people that are going to be touching and working on an IMR. We expect that you already have seen and taken the training on the TechWorks CC2 and NC products because they're the ones that work with the IMR. So we assume you already know that and don't have to explain too much about what they are, but we will cover how this interacts with them. The structure of this training is 3 parts. The reason is part 2 of this is very short. There's not a lot of parts and there's not a lot of system wiring. This is part 1. So this is the product overview. If you would like to follow along, there is a presentation guide handout available online at techworks-usa.com. And there is also certification for installers. If you want to take all 3 parts of this test and you pass them, we will be happy to certify you as an IMR qualified installer. First of all, let's start with what is an IMR. It's integrated messaging and reporting. Well, what exactly is that? This is a custom-built computer in a single box. There's literally a PC inside of this box hiding in there. It doesn't do much unless you program it. It sits there and does what the factory designed it to do. But if you want it to do all the things we're going to talk about and show you that it can do, you have to build in enough time in your bid, in your proposal, to program this thing. The programming is what makes the IMR talk to the world. If you don't program it, it still works. It does what it's designed to do, but it's not going to share it with the world. In a clinic with room status or a nurse call system, there are a bunch of smart devices that communicate on the TechWorks data network. You connect that network that on an NC system is the annunciators. On the CC2 product, it's all the devices talk to each other over the network. You connect that network to the IMR on these screw terminals right over here. It's just like the connectors on everything else in a clinic call or annunciators on a nurse call. It's the same connector, same exact connections, data plus, minus, or TNR, transmit and receive, and then power, plus and minus. It's all right here. Just connect them up. The IMR learns what is connected to it. So every time you push a button, it goes through the network and comes into here, and it just sits there and listens. It logs every button push and identifies every light that comes on in a SQL Server database. So then, if you want to make this thing go to work, you connect it to your local area network. Just plug in a Cat6 patch cable, and off you go. That's all there is to sharing your data with the world. But in order to make that happen in a concise and understandable manner, you have to tell this IMR what all those points are. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of data. It doesn't know. It says 0.111 came on at this time, 0.111 went off at this time. If you do your job and you label that point very clearly, administrators, staff, other people can see that point come on and off over the network. It can display on tablets. It can send text messages. It can do a bunch of stuff. But you've got to tell it what to do. It doesn't do it automatically. It doesn't know what's out here in the world. It knows what's connected up here. Doesn't know what's out there in the world of things. So with a clinic, just in case you haven't watched our other videos, you put a patient in the room, the green light starts flashing. That slow flashing tells the doctor which patient is next. The doctor visits the room and says, oh, I need an X-ray technician. So he pushes the yellow button and leaves. The X-ray technician goes to the next patient's slow flashing light. When they're done, they need the doctor. So they turn their yellow light off and turn the green light back on, puts it back in the queue for the doctor. When it's the next patient for that doctor, again, it starts slow flashing. Doctor goes in, completes the visit, and says, okay, we're done with this room for today. We need the room cleaned. They press the blue button to tell somebody to come clean and tidy up. If any time during this process there's an emergency, the red button can be an emergency staff assist. You can also hook up a pull station or a staff assist to this dome light and fire that red light from a remote station to make it more convenient for the doctor. Colors and functions can be customized within certain limits. Let's talk about critical communication in a nurse call. Nurse call is life safety. This can be as simple as a standalone restroom, which is not connected to anything but power. That won't talk to an IMR. If you have a system which may consist of things like a white light for staff is in the room, a red light flashing means that staff person needs help. You can have patient stations. These could be in isolation rooms in a hospital. They could be in dialysis, chemotherapy. All kinds of different treatment centers use our patient stations. You could add vandal-proof hardware to these systems, and it could be in detention facilities, anywhere mental health where non-ligature is a requirement. Code Blue, this is a big deal. Staff assist and ambulatory surgery, Code Blue, all in one package. When you tie all this together on a network by adding a control module and adding enunciators, you suddenly get a large system up to 256 stations, and that data that is going to your enunciators is what feeds an IMR. So let's talk about adding an IMR and how that can help you share relevant information. Let's talk about text messages. This is literally a screenshot of my cell phone with messages coming from a clinic call system. It's telling me that this patient is ready to see me. This patient is ready to see me. Now this patient's ready to see me. These are all just simple text messages to my personal cell phone. Custom text can be added to any point in any one of our systems to identify what that is. So this is where the programming comes in. You got to tell it what the point is, then you got to tell it what the message is you want to send. Not to mention, you got to tell it how to send it, how to get out of the network. But it will go to any phone and any carrier. Doesn't care. Doesn't care if it's an iPhone or a Android. Doesn't know. Doesn't care. Pocket pagers. Some people still like an old style pocket pager. It's simple and it communicates very cost effectively. Tablets. Anything that we can put on the network of things can appear on a tablet. If your staff is using tablets to do patient records and that kind of thing, we can put the graphics of this facility on that tablet. Digital signage. This is very popular. People like to see what's going on in a graphic image. This can be put onto a standard smart TV. Anything IP. Here's your IMR. It's just sitting there plugged into your network and communicating with whatever you have hooked to your network. Any PC on the system can display the IMR, and it can become an administrative terminal based on the credentials of the person using the system. So when you log in as a user and you put in your password, it determines what you see and what you can do on that IMR. Who cares and why? Doctors typically don't care. However, staff needs to know where providers are. By watching the colored lights and the blinking and the order of blinking and who's what, this little legend that appears tells them which color is which person in a clinic. Specialists like X-ray technicians cover more rooms typically than a doctor. A doctor will cover about 4 exam rooms. An X-ray technician could cover 30. Sometimes text messaging is a much better tool for them than colored lights on a display screen. This gives them a very clear reading of where they're needed next. This is typically radiology, could be casting in an orthopedic clinic, could be housekeeping. Anyone that's covering a lot of space can benefit from things like this. Then there's management reports. Every single one of these calls is logged, and depending on how you label it, this information can be extremely informative to management. It can determine performance of staff, it can determine efficiencies, it can determine patient care and satisfaction. How long did somebody wait to see a particular provider? You're getting really high scores for how fast your doctor gets in to see a patient, but maybe you are short-staffed on X-ray technicians and they're waiting forever to get an X-ray. These reports can help. Staffing levels can be determined for both efficiency, having the right staff there at the right time of day, and the right amount of staff to keep patient satisfaction up. Creating efficiencies, how do we do this? Integration with multiple tools, that's the key. Call management with transaction logging. Every button push is logged in the IMR. Every button, time and date stamped. SQL Server database, very easy to share information. That information can be put onto the network so it can either be displayed or accessed as required by anyone. IP server, because this thing acts as a server, anyone that can get access to it can get access to that data, either on-premise or through portable devices or off-premise through the WAN. Everything is password protected. Inside the IMR, the database is password protected by how you set up your users. If you would like to, we can interface to your electronic medical records. It's much more up to the electronic medical records people if they know how to integrate with this data. Again, it's a SQL server, so they can get at it, they can retrieve these records. The difference is typically in an IMR, we don't know who the patient is. We know what room they're in. We know how many rooms there are in the building, but the IMR doesn't know anything about the patient. So if you're going to track that patient care by a physical location, you have to develop something that ties a patient to a place, because we're tracking places and people like doctors by color. We're not tracking patients. So that's the interface that needs to be done if someone wants to integrate this with medical records. Very easy to do, but got to be a cross connect there in your relational database. You can customize these graphics to improve your communication so that anybody that looks at this knows where everybody is. These signage, this digital signage, can also produce announcements and messages. Any WAV file can be associated with a color. Custom graphics. You can have graphics that apply only to certain people. If you set this thing up correctly, we could share the same floor plan, but only my exam rooms are going to appear on my device. We'll cover all of that later in the programming section of this series. You can create custom reports. Again, depending on how you label all of these locations, exam rooms, other areas, and the types of calls, how you label the types of calls and how you label the areas in the building determines how effective those custom reports are. Let's talk about digital signage a little more detail. All of these screens are simply HTML. So they're web pages. You view them in a browser. Any device with a standard web browser can view these displays. Anything. And that browser is tied to that user by the way they log in. It's not hardware oriented. Custom graphics. You send us a JPG of your display, what you want to show on a screen. This can be exported from AutoCAD. It can come from whatever source you have these graphics. But I can't stress enough, it has to be clean. It can't be messy. It can't be scribbled all over and a bad scan. It's got to be a clear image. And if it is a PDF, we can convert it as long as it's clean, but it's got to be clean. We also need you to send us the point information. We don't know what you addressed each one of these rooms as. You did something out there when you installed this, and you have point identification of these locations. You need to take out a print that matches this floor plan and write down the addresses on here so we know where to put them on the graphic for you. Critical that you understand addressing and that you communicate to us what addresses and what location. If you add a touch panel, like a tablet, okay, this is a touch screen. A tablet is a touch screen. You can add buttons. I can touch a room and turn on a color. Why would I want to do that? Sometimes it's because I want to turn a light on to tell a patient, go to this room and let yourself in. Might save time. It's called self-rooming. It's one of the ways this system can help. The other thing is these buttons on your screen select different floor plans. You can select between different floor plans if you have a touchscreen. Let's talk about how IMR affects Dr. Follow. First of all, we all understand that Dr. Follow is a sequence of flashing lights. Inside of the IMR, you create a group which identifies devices by their address and by the group name. So if these two devices are addressed the same and they are labeled as the same group name, like exam room 1, they become as if they were one device to the IMR. Now we can take those and we can create pools. A pool is a group of groups, if you will, that's associated with a provider or a function. So this doctor might cover these two rooms in pool number 1, and another doctor covers these two rooms in pool number 2. When a patient is ready for a doctor in pool number 1, it flashes the green light, let's say. Could be any color, but let's say it's green for doctor number 1 in pool number 1. Pool number 2 tracks totally separately. So its doctor green light is going to flash separately from pool number 1. Let's talk about what determines a pool. A pool is typically a geographic area that is associated with a discipline. It's a small group of rooms associated with their own nurses station that are doing something unique within this facility. A couple of ways to make a pool. The old school way and the most inexpensive way is to use one of our enunciators that groups these rooms together in a clinic. What's wrong with that? It's a one size fits all. If you group all these green lights together, you are also grouping all of these yellow, all of these blue, and all of these reds together. You can't segment these two yellows from these greens in the way that I'm going to track these two yellows, but I'm going to track all 8 greens. Doesn't work that way. Not with this hardware. It's not capable of that. So bring in the IMR. Now I can make a pool out of any color or any combination of colors, any room, anywhere, anything that's on the system. It's not tied to color. It's not tied to location. Any button in this facility that's logged into this box can be made into a pool. Now, typically what you're going to do is you're going to do it by color. You're going to combine a bunch of green lights together, a bunch of yellow lights together, because that identifies a person or a function that's needed in that room. But you don't have to. It's totally flexible. Let's talk about swing rooms. This makes swing rooms possible. So let's say you got a room that's shared between 2 different doctors from time to time. One day it's over here on this side. The next day it's on this side because the pool members changed from one day to the next. What would that look like? Well, let's say it's this room. It's halfway in between 2 areas of the building. And one day it's needed over here by this group for whatever reason. And the next day it's needed over here by this group. Very simple to do by creating 2 pools. You have 2 pools that both include room 3B. It's just which one you assign for that day. Really and truly, the IMR is that simple. We need you to understand how powerful it is if you spend the time programming it. All of the information is available on our website 24/7, 365 at techworks-usa.com. There's brochures, there's specifications. We're always here to help with design and quote assistance. We provide those graphic displays. We create the HTML. That's something that we offer as a service to you. It also helps in the programming, identification of these points. The more information you give us up front, the more we can preload into this IMR for you. And we'll include that in quotes. We'll help you develop a solution. The thing we can't do is the on-site programming. There's a certain portion of making an IMR work that includes documentation and communication with us to help you make a successful IMR fully integrate. We're here to help, but it's much easier to provide you tech support or quoting and design assistance if you know what you're looking at. We hope that before you call us, you watch this training, read the installation manual / system guide. We call them both. It's the same thing. It's a book about this product. Lots of detail in there, more detail than I can provide you in a video. Look at that information, get certified, and then call tech support and we'll help walk you through it. But it's going to help communicate a lot better if you've watched these videos. Thank you very much for your time. Up next is part 2, parts and wiring of the IMR.